Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Everyday Anarchism. My guest today is Carson Lund, who is the director of I don't even know what to call it. Maybe I'll let you introduce it, but a film called Eephus, which is, if you don't know, and of course I did know because my dad is an old-timey baseball obsessive. Eephus is a really weird, old-fashioned baseball pitch. And Carson, you made a movie that is like metaphorically an Eephus. Is that why it's called Eephus? And can you just tell us what this movie is, and then we can start talking about what I at least found interesting about it.
Yeah, it's Eephus is a slow lobbed pitch in baseball. It's basically a pitch that doesn't require any specialty, but that's exactly why it's effective. Because relative to other pitches, it's so much slower. It comes in higher. It crosses the plate at an odd angle, and it just throws the hitter off. It was invented by this guy Rip Sewell, I think, in the 40s or 50s, and then thrown, or at least that pitch had been thrown, but the name Eephus came from Rip Sewell. And then players like Bill Lee, who's in the film, also then threw it. But anyway, that's just a long preamble to what the film is, which is actually a film about one baseball game played by an adult rec league in New England at the end of a season before the field that they play on is torn down to make way for a new middle school. So it is like kind of an end of an era comedy about a bunch of guys losing their kind of like their sanctuary, where they get to distract themselves for 3-4 hours every Sunday, and in this case much longer than that because the game goes on interminably. The film hopefully isn't interminable, but it is very much a movie about one day spent on a baseball field, and has all the kind of eccentricities that implies.
Okay, yeah, I think that's a great introduction. And now I will say, I watched it and really enjoyed it. And the reason why it immediately struck me as a film that I wanted to think about and talk about on this podcast. It's called Everyday Anarchism, and I spend more time really on political anarchism than I meant to. But I really, when I started this podcast, I was just interested in all of the ways that people made communities, made their own rules, did their own thing, and sort of lived the lives that they wanted to live. And then, one of the big enemies of everyday anarchism, I was just reading some letters of J.R.R. Tolkien, who described himself as an anarchist, and he's like, the enemies are like the planners, the people who want to decide what you're going to do with your life and where everything is going to be, and they're fighting for progress. And so when I watched this movie about these mostly middle-aged guys, just they don't. There's very little going on in their lives, it seems like, except for this game, which is, I've said the word meaningless. I'm going to keep saying it. It's totally a meaningless game. It counts for nothing,
Mm-hmm.
and the planners are going to destroy this game and bring progress in the form of a school. And so it's just this like totally like there's zero stakes about this. I mean, you can have this story of like the planners are going to destroy a community with a highway. Like there's this like macro, like huge, like Robert Moses destroyed thriving African American neighborhoods, and this is like the least consequential version of this story one can imagine. And yet it truly matters to these guys. They've got a ball game and they've got a community, and they're mean to each other constantly, but it's their life, and it's going away. I guess that wasn't a question. That's just a statement. But say anything in response to that you would like.
Yeah, I mean I think it's important to have a sense of humor. The film is a comedy. And it derives a lot from my own experiences playing baseball, and finding humor in that world, and characters in that world, just the kind of teammates I've played with over the years. I felt like I want to see those types of people on screen. I think it's a very they're very colorful people, and I have found solace in the rec baseball community, and also frustration and all kinds of emotions that I find very, very consequential in my own life. So as meaningless as this game is, and we did strive to make this game as meaningless as possible. It is a makeup game. It is not a championship game, as has been mistakenly reported in certain press, it is a makeup game. So it's like it was rained out earlier that season, and now they're just playing it just to get on with it before the wrecking ball comes. Um, I think yes, it is. It is on from the outside very meaningless, very trivial, and yet I think the film's trying to ask the question like, what is meaningful in our lives? Like, what? How do we value our time? What does it mean for something to be boring or meaningless? Well, if it's bringing joy, if it's connecting you to some passion that reminds you of when you were a kid or some sort of lost innocence, is that meaningless? Is that actually? I would argue that's like the most important thing. So in a way, the film is extremely meaningful to these people. The story is extremely meaningful to them. What they're losing is extremely meaningful. And I think the only way to make an audience aware of what I just talked about is by making it seem as meaningless as possible. Because as long as you're if you can connect with those characters, if you can sort of put yourself in their shoes and feel what they're feeling, then you can start to understand that you start to kind of question this whole idea of how we define excitement and how do we define a good use of time. I think the film's asking those questions, and for me, a good use of time is anything that is not making someone else rich, is making you happy. That's I think what life is all about. So, uh, no, I think the film certainly seems to align with the mission statement of your podcast.
Yeah, I mean, look, anything that's not making someone else rich. I mean, this is if I mean, time is money is maybe a bit of an oversimplification, but like the idea that time is money, I mean, that's just one of the most that is one of the things that it seems to me is doing the most to prevent us from having the lives we want to have. The idea that everything has to be done for an
Mhm.
a
Yeah,
reason within the field of economics, and you simply can't justify recreational middle-aged recreational baseball. I mean, I really do think like this is like a good test, like when you're learning math and the teacher is like, make sure you divide by zero, to see what happens. Like this is a good test case, because like with youth sports, everyone's always like, oh, well, it's good because they're learning leadership, or maybe we'll identify some of the future great players.
yeah,
There's this idea that youth sports, so I should say I haven't played softball for a long time. I'm now a recreational soccer player, and soccer is sort of the enemy in this in
yeah,
this film.
yeah.
when I every time the
At least
baseball
for
players,
the characters, at least.
yeah, yeah, right. Every time the baseball players look over, and there's a smaller but livelier soccer game going on, and they're glaring at them.
Yeah, yeah,
And it's like, oh no, that's me. I'm the soccer infidel who's come to destroy the gates of baseball. But I mean, I certainly grew up. I grew up playing baseball, but I work at a big university, University of North Carolina, which has a huge sports program, and with everything that's been happening with NIL and the transfer portal, money and power and winning is just flowing through sports culture right now. Oh, I hadn't even thought about the betting. I mean, I've stayed totally out of the betting, but obviously sports betting is flowing through American sports culture. And
yes,
this makeup game for a season that's over, for a field that's going to be demolished, I just feel like you have totally isolated the thing itself, the game, baseball, from any of these reasons that people could justify it. Those guys are there playing baseball because they want to play baseball.
yes,
There's no other reason. Does that sound right?
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they're kind of creating their own little utopia, even though they're all frustrated at each other. I would say that their frustrations are deriving from the obligations that exist in their lives that they have to go back to. They're frustrated for kind of false pretenses. Like they're frustrated because they know they have to get up that next morning to go make money for someone else, like they have to go work. and they have to go back to their boring families or something. That's how they see it, you know. But this is where they want to be themselves. This is what brings them the most joy. Um, and I think baseball is a key sport for this because it it much unlike soccer, which and many other sports like that with two goals where like there's a timer, you know, and
Yeah.
the game will end when the time runs out, the clock runs out. Baseball does not have that. Baseball can go on forever. It does create its own kind of universe and its own sense of time. And as long as it's tied, it could go forever. And it connects us to the past. It connects us to the pastoral, you know, to American history. I think when you enter between those chalk lines and you play baseball, you are in a way connecting with this much greater heritage and with a sense of like eternity. Not to be too poetic about it, but that I think is the key thing about baseball, and you feel it when you play it. That time seems to suspend. You enter into some kind of time warp, and it allows you to really feel like you are separating yourself from all those stressors. I mean, I think that's true of any sport, but especially the rules of this game and the structure of it, I think, really lends itself to that. I can't remember the point I was making. I think that's important to note. That's why I chose baseball. I mean, I also play it, and I find that the kind of rhythms that the game abides by, the patience it requires, the acceptance of failure most of the time, it's really humbling, and it places you in your own body, and it reminds you that you're human in a way that I think is very unique and very probably pretty crucial in a modern world that is hyper capitalist and moving faster and faster, and we exist in all these digital realms, and it's hard to get a sense of what is real, you know, and you know what is human. So I
Yeah.
think baseball can do that. I think it's the film's it's sort of like an argument for slowing things down in this world where it's very hard to kind of grapple with that, with the real, with the tangible, with joy. You know, what is joy when everything's been optimized and monetized? Um, I think
Yeah, but and I just want to add, including baseball. So I mean, I don't watch a lot of Major League Baseball anymore. I mean, I have kids. I get to watch European soccer like in the mornings on the weekends because it works well because that's the only time I'm not committed to something, and then that's also the only time that European soccer's on. And then like if
yeah,
baseball comes on at 10 p.m. because I live on the East Coast, like there's
yeah,
no I can't. I mean, it doesn't even the East Coast games start at 8 p.m. And man, if you're getting up at 6:30 a.m. to get your kids to school by 7:20 a.m., you're not. I at least am not watching a lot of 8 p.m. games. But
yeah,
when I do put baseball on these days, there's that fucking clock
yes,
ticking, the
yeah,
pitch clock. And so I guess it's true what you say about baseball existing outside of time, like in the macro sense, you could still have 27 innings, although they've ruined that with the
yeah.
like runners on base. Like the 10th, is that when runners on base start? Or do you
Yeah, in the 10th. I mean,
Yeah.
I should have specified that what I'm describing is baseball, that baseball as it existed prior to 4 years ago.
Yes, I know.
Now in the modern era, that like this is part of what inspired the film, is that like Rob Manfred is doing everything in his power to make baseball fit the demands of current attention spans, and to try to kind of like poison the well of the poetry of the game. Like he's trying to make it move faster. He's trying to get it over with so that people aren't hung over at their day jobs.
Yeah. Baseball
Like,
must serve capitalism
yes,
better.
yes, exactly. So that's what he's doing. And I've been to baseball games in the last few years, and it's frustrating. You get there, maybe if you're a little bit late and you show up in the second inning, in the game, and it's a short game. Nowadays, games can go 2 hours and 20 minutes, and you leave, and you only had time for one beer and one hot dog, and you're like, what am I doing? What's going on? Like I thought I could go there and kind of sprawl out and
You
lose
could
myself.
breathe.
Yeah. And so it's I should make that clear that baseball has changed quite a bit, and it's I think mostly for the worse. it's really there was a piece the other day, and I think Decider by this guy Noah Gittell, who's written a book about baseball, and he's talking about Eephus in the context of contemporary MLB and how it's like it's this over fixation on elite athleticism at the expense of the kind of slowness and kind of everyday working class kind of appeal that baseball once had, with these schlubs on the field smoking and drinking in the dugout, and had unruly facial hair and this sort of thing. And now it's about like elite athleticism, uh, optimized statistics, sabermetrics, all this stuff that I think is so antithetical to what is so beautiful about the game. And so I really wanted to. There's a reason I made this film now. I think it's a reason why I set it in the '90s when this version of the game would have been played, prior to what we have now. Um, I think we've lost the kind of baseball that gets played in Eephus. Maybe it's still played in small parks across the country, um, and it's played in the kind of league that I play in. But on a larger level, even the minors are getting polluted by this thinking now.
Yeah, no, you're probably right. So I haven't actually been to a Durham Bulls game. We live like 10 miles from the Durham Bulls, and I haven't been to a Durham Bulls game lately. And when I was there a few years ago, I guess I haven't been post COVID. It's one of the many, many things that we stopped doing during COVID, and and even though we've been vaccinated and out in the world for a few years, somehow it hasn't picked back up. So I'll have to go to a Durham Bulls game soon and see if the spirit, because definitely, I mean, I mean, one thing that we can and should talk about is, there's a long, long history of baseball movies. Hollywood and baseball go together, but also it seems like most baseball movies, they tend to be weird or oddballs or in some way. And so then the famous Bull Durham that was shot about at the old that was shot about 15, maybe 12 miles from where I am, because that was shot at the old Durham Bulls Stadium, not the new Durham Bulls Stadium. And the old Durham Bulls Stadium does still exist. I don't know what they use it for. It's next to the farmers market. It's still there though.
That's cool.
They have concerts there. I know, like I had tickets to see Yola Tango there one time, but
Oh, cool.
I got sick or something and wasn't able to go see him. But that's Yola Tango, another
Huge,
baseball.
huge baseball band.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
yeah.
I wasn't, and I don't, man. I mean, I wasn't even thinking about this. So again, a bunch of things. Maybe we'll talk about film in a second, because I want to go back to what you talked about with time and sort of like the real. So I'm pretty, professionally, my PhD is in literature and culture, and I'm pretty interested in this question of like truth in art. There's an old quote. I think it's like Nathaniel Hawthorne said it about Anthony Trollope or something like that. But it's like Trollope's novels are like the like just a chunk of turf that has been like hoisted out of the ground, and you can look at it. The idea being it's real, it's solid, it's not airy, it's not a confection, it's not mirrors, it's not exciting. A chunk of turf ripped out of the ground, it doesn't it's not like, oh wow, this chunk of turf is so amazing. No one has ever said that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
in a world in which you are always feeling like everything is too busy or too corporate or too aestheticized or something, a chunk of turf is like, yeah, this is something to hold on to.
Yeah.
And I thought Eephus fit into this chunk of turf aesthetics. I probably don't even have the quote right, but it's something like that.
And that's the writer, Trollope.
I think Hawthorne says that about Trollope's
Oh,
novels,
gotcha,
or
gotcha.
maybe it's Trollope says it about Hawthorne's novels. You can see
Yeah,
what
yeah, yeah.
you can see. I didn't prepare this quote ahead of time, but I was just thinking of it as we talked.
Yeah, it feels like something. I don't know about literary criticism as much, but it sounds like something that Manny Farber would write about
Yeah,
films. The idea of like trying to look past kind of the marketing of a film, or how it's presented to you, and or the genre, and find these little bits of expressiveness and tactility, um, that are kind of on the edges. I, yeah, I mean, I don't know how to respond to that other than I take it as a compliment. If Eephus feels like a chunk of turf, I think that's a good thing. I think a lot of the films that come across our screens these days, on streaming or in the theater, just feel disposable. They feel slick and well produced, and they have stars in them, and but they don't necessarily. I think there's that tactility that you're talking about, and that sense of the real. I don't know. It sometimes eludes me when I watch contemporary films. Some of that has to do with maybe with digital photography, but it's not. It's certainly not. I don't want to do a screed against digital photography, especially since Eephus is shot digitally. But I think there's a kind of a sameness to a lot of these films, that, especially, it's quite true with streamers like Netflix, where they have demands about how films are presented, how they look, the technical specs, and this stuff. It's all just existing in a marketplace. So for a film to actually, I like a film to do something that feels like it's deliberately obstructing that order. Like doing something that feels wrong within that context. Like, oh, this is moving slower than it should. Oh, that's deliberate. There's a human behind this that's making it. I think. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, for a film to feel like it's a, it's kind of a wrench in the works. And I think Eephus is doing that a bit, in terms of how it might seduce you with genre, or with films that you do, like other baseball films that you love, and maybe you feel like you're going to get that experience here, but I want to lull you into, I want to bring you in with that, and then lull you into something different. I like using the window dressing of a comforting genre to then take you somewhere else, and then return you to that kind of, just a sense of time passing, and an awareness of that, and mundanity. I think that's good in cinema and art. I think it's good to be reminded of the mundane, because so often our lives are flooded with the spectacular, or we're seeking that. And I think, yeah, that's something I want to do with Eephus, is like, you may come expecting something, but you end up somewhere quite different, and you end up sinking into the rhythms of the film, and feeling. I mean, it reminds me of something. Um, I think it was like Chantal Ackerman was talking about. Chantal Ackerman, right?
Yeah.
Jean
Yes.
Dielman. She was talking about that, and responses to that, and people talking about it being slow, or they felt that it was boring or whatever. And she said, "Good. I want you to feel the time. I want you to be reminded that you're that there's that you are a mortal being, that you will die someday," which is a really dark way to put it, but I'm not so sure. I think it's also life affirming as well.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, look, Chantal Ackerman went to some pretty dark places, but I don't. The sort of like the traditional, like memento mori, like going back to the Roman times, like remember that you will die. It wasn't. It wasn't meant to be dark. It
Yeah,
wasn't supposed to scare you. It was supposed to remind you to live,
yeah,
but not in the chasing sort of way, in this sort of like relaxing, accepting way. This is life, and
Zen.
you only get so much of it.
It's like Zen. Yeah,
Yeah.
just accepting.
So, it's interesting that you mentioned Zen, because I've told the story a few times, and so far no one as I don't know. This is just, I guess, when you have a Zen moment, it's yours, and then when you try and explain it to people, it doesn't work, and that's pretty Zen as well. But one of my like least enjoyable days of my life, if you leave aside all the like truly tragic days where like a loved one died, or like just like a regular day that I truly hated, was I was trying to visit. There's a story that's going to make everyone hate me, because this is the experience I had was truly memorable, and everyone's going to want to have had it, and I hated it. Was I was trying to go to the Super Mario World in Osaka, because I was visiting Kyoto, and I got inside Universal Studios World or whatever it's called, like as soon as I could, and I tried to sign up for tickets to Super Mario World, and it was like at 6 p.m. or something, and it was like 8:35 a.m. and I did not want to be in Universal Studios. I just wanted to see this Mario Land, and so I was just trapped in Universal Studios Japan for, I mean, whatever 8:30 a.m. to 5:30 or 6 p.m. is, like 8 or 9 hours,
Oh,
utterly miserable. And as I
that
was
reminds
walking
me of
around,
live in a different way. Yeah.
yeah, well, you know, it did seem, and maybe this again just makes me sound like a pretentious professor, because like as I was walking around, oh, who's the character in Catch 22 who's always trying to make himself miserable so his life lasts longer? Have you read Catch 22?
No, I've seen the film though.
Yeah. Well, there's a character in Catch 22 who's always trying to make himself miserable so that life lasts longer, because he's like, when you're bored and miserable, life slows down. So that is one of the longest days I've lived. But I was just walking around, and I was hating everything,
Mm.
and I was watching
Yeah, I've been
everyone.
there in that same, in like a Disney World type situation. Yeah.
Yeah. Everyone else seemed to be enjoying it. I'm not sure why. I shouldn't be, judging or condemning them. They were enjoying it. These hundreds of thousands of people who were there, plenty of Japanese people, plenty of foreign tourists. But I was staying in Kyoto, and then when I went the next day, I tried to walk around Kyoto and I got lost. And I ended up in like what is like the second biggest Zen temple in Japan or something, totally by accident. And I spent hours there, and there were a few tourists there, but it was basically just empty. It was just sort of me wandering, and I met a monk who, I mean, I speak no Japanese. He didn't speak much English, but I was able to convey that I was from the United States, and I don't know. He mentioned like Tom Cruise or something, like what some random American he could think of. And I just thought one of these places was designed to, like, give me this truly spectacular experience. And clearly it was working for lots of people.
Yeah.
It's that vision of that Netflix movie you're talking about.
Yeah.
And the other one was just like, look, I mean, a lot of work went into this Zen temple, but the work was it was stripping away, it was refining. It was like,
Yeah.
there used to be 7 rocks here, and now there's 2 rocks, and just look at them. And I just thought, again, maybe this makes me a pretentious asshole. Like, we need more people who want to stand in front of rocks and breathe and be,
Yeah.
and fewer people who want to ride roller coasters. I'm sorry if riding roller coaster is your greatest joy in life, and I'm ruining it. But I don't know. I felt that, and so to bring it all the way around to both Eephus the film and baseball the game, it's about breathing. It's about being in a way that, as you said at the beginning of this interview, doesn't seem that's the world we live in right now.
Yeah. It's not in vogue, let's say. Well, one of the best responses I get to the film, and I have received this response many times, even in person, is just like, now I want to join a rec league. I'm looking into rec leagues in my region, and whether it's a rec league or some social club or anything in that realm, where you're, to bring it back to the beginning, where you're creating a community and you're creating your own rules, kind of, and the terms on which you meet, and the kind of relationships you're establishing, like that's good. I mean, not everyone who watches the film is going to be a baseball fan, but maybe they will go join a bridge club or something. I don't know. But it's the idea of having these spaces where we can just uh, not have a great responsibility, where the pressure's off, where we can do something we love with other people who love doing that same thing. Those spaces are seriously dwindling in this current America. Sometimes that's because there's literally not the physical space to do it, whether it's a park that's been privatized, or a mall was built on top of it or something, or just these, like, libraries. Like, I worked at a library for a long time in my hometown, and no one goes to the library anymore, and they had to get rid of a lot of their assets, and they're struggling, and they're still there, fortunately, the one in my hometown, but I know many libraries that are not there anymore, and there's no funding. So just places like this, where you don't have to go have a branded experience. um, yeah, and these kinds of things. So for me, like baseball is very key to the film. But having taken this movie in across the world in many different places where baseball is not a game that is well understood, the idea of seeking that kind of extracurricular or leisure activity, and that being a valuable way to spend one's time, that's something that comes across, and people can relate to the film on the level of something they do that is you know a parallel to that.
Yeah, and I think I mean, the Bridge Club example is a good one. It does seem, and I mean, there's a long discourse. There's the bowling alone idea. I mean, it does seem that that people leave their house to do things with other people less often, except for pickleball. And as much as I want to critique pickleball, see people seem to be enjoying pickleball. So
I do too.
that's
I want to
yeah,
critique. I
okay.
like, yeah, ping pong's okay and tennis is okay, but we don't need some middle ground.
Well, I mean,
I'm gonna play tennis if you want the exercise.
oh well, look, I spent many years as a teenager teaching kids to play tennis, and it's not easy.
No,
If
it
you
isn't.
don't,
It isn't. I know. I'm being a bit of an asshole about pickle.
no, I mean, look, I think that what I'm trying to say is I feel the same way as you about pickleball, but I'm just going to professionally not critique pickleball because it is a thing that people are doing
Yeah,
together. And so actually, even though I want to be a dick about it, it seems like pickleball is a good example of this thing that we're losing. I was thinking, maybe we can use
yeah.
poker. I mean, I've never been a big poker player, but it seems like, when I was younger, people played poker, and it seems like poker playing is down, and
There's a lot.
watching poker playing on TV is up, and that general, like, that passivity, it
Yes.
just seems like watching, as like talking about elite athletics, watching the best in the world do blank, whatever
Yeah.
blank is,
Hmm.
seems to have replaced just going out and finding some buddies and playing poker. And that's again why Eephus is a counter, the idea that you would actually play baseball as opposed to watching baseball. How it doesn't get more counterculture than that
Yeah.
right now.
Well, I also know about like that people have poker clubs over Zoom. This sounds miserable to me. Like
I,
the whole appeal of playing poker is to be in a smoky back room with Lee Marvin or
yeah.
someone like that, and then you're playing poker. But we actually had a bit on our set, on the Eephus set, the cast house. We had like a big cabin in the woods where talk about anarchy. I mean, that was separate from society, deep in the woods of at the border of Rhode Island and Massachusetts. 15 to 20 guys hanging out in a cabin together playing poker. There was a big poker thing going on. I was not privy to it because I was at a different house with the crew, but like, yeah, this film, they really created a little community, and the kind of camaraderie you see on screen is a reflection of what actually happened between all these men who were, and many of them told me, like, I haven't had this much fun since I was a kid, or like I feel like I've made very fast friends and they're going to be lifelong friends. I feel like I'm doing, yeah. It was really special to see that, the way that everybody just got along. I mean, I was very careful in the casting to make sure I was picking people that wouldn't be inflammatory or throw off the vibe. But I'm still lucky that you know that worked out. But yeah, we owned that field for a month, and we set the schedule. People were respectful of that schedule, and yet it felt very loose and very fun and casual. Um, which, yeah, I think that's at its best. That's something that a club or a sport, and I mean, I think there's a film production is another one of these sorts of community. Any sort of like a group making a piece of art. Of course, Eephus now exists in the marketplace, but we made it for not very much money, and people were really in it for the love of it. And I think there's a clear analogy in the film, or to me there is, between the practice of independent filmmaking and something like this baseball league, which doesn't have enough resources, The umpires have to go home. The only form of quote unquote authority in the film has to leave because they're not making enough money on this. And then what's left? Okay, a dark field. How do we light it? We need lighting. We need resources. Um, that to me is for me that's a parallel to the independent filmmaking world that I occupy, and just finding ways to move forward and working with a large group of people to just create this sheer force of will and push something forward. Um, I think that's what's going on with the players on the field, is needing that solidarity and togetherness to push forward and kind of create this kind of messy, chaotic form of democracy. By electing Franny, the scorekeeper, as the new ump. It's their way of just together figuring out how can we move forward, how can we create some semblance of order here, and yet still tap into the joy that we're seeking. So, yeah, in a way, the film is like it's an argument for democracy, but in a kind of more at a more human level. People just figuring things out. Because I think when the umpires are there, things are less. They're being held together a bit better, but the game is proceeding under pretenses that maybe are more transactional. That they're paying someone to be there. So now when he's gone, even though that it's dark and they're frustrated, like now it's like the pure thing. They're really enjoying it, I think.
Yeah. No, that was wonderful. I mean, you touched on so very briefly. Yeah, it does seem to me that independent film fits this perfectly. If the old way of doing things was was a form of like mechanized factory capitalism where you went to work every day, and if you were, I mean, there, like, John Ford didn't, because he did whatever he wanted, but I think like Howard Hawks went to work every day, and the whoever made the sets that day also went to work, and whoever wrote that film and the people who starred in it, they all went to work that day, and the boss was like, all right, we're starting a new Hawks picture on Monday, and
Yeah.
you two are starring in it, kind of like if you went to work at 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 any other job. And then since whatever, since Jaws or Star Wars or whatever, we've had the 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 blockbuster based cinema, which finally got corporatized and streamlined by Marvel, and they killed it, as near as I can tell, by corporatizing it and streamlining it too much. And people don't like the Marvel movies anywhere near as much as they did when there was still a little of the old uh, George Lucas and Steven Spielberg like counter ethos. But besides that, there's just people doing what they can. I mean, when you watch the credits for the kind of independent film that I watch, especially the European ones, there's usually like 50 bodies that contributed
Mhm.
money to it, and almost all of them are like a museum, a national film archive. It's just like,
Yeah.
please, won't someone support cinema, because quote the market, which really just means corporate power or whatever, is is not going to. It's not that people don't want to watch these films, but the bosses don't want to pay to make
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, preaching to the choir. Tell me about it.
them.
It's,
Yeah,
uh,
well, I just have to watch the movies. I don't have to try and actually raise the funding
oh,
to
it's
make them. um
it's a tough racket. That the deeper I've gone into this world, the less sustainable it seems.
yeah.
The less it makes any logical sense as a business model. But here I am anyway, trying to ride this wave as long as I can because I need to do it. I have to. It feels like what I'm supposed to do. Um, I don't know. Was there a question in there? And I'm trying.
No, I don't think so. But I mean, I guess I the next thing I'll say, I mean, what is no questions? I mean, everything you said. I guess the reason why I didn't have a question is because I had a few questions, one about independent filmmaking and one about democracy, and you just answered both of them in the long last answer. Which is the other thing, is like the one bit of actual like political philosophy in this movie is when the ump leaves.
Yes.
and they just figured it out. Now I use the word anarchy.
Maybe I sensed that you were going to ask me that at
Yeah,
some point, so I just went
yeah.
ahead and tried to
You
answer.
must have known that
Yeah.
I was going to ask that. I would use the word anarchy, but this basically, and I occasionally discuss this with political philosophers, and we don't agree, but we don't much not like whatever you would want to call like direct democracy or radical democracy and anarchy. It's not really clear that there's a difference
Yeah. Yeah.
between them. So like if they had gotten together and like argued a lot and had a campaign and spent a lot of money and then elected a new umpire and then created a bureaucratic structure on that umpire, we would call that democracy in the like sense that we have quote democracy today. That doesn't really seem to be very democratic.
Right. Exactly.
So anarchy meaning just like people get together in a room and are like, can Franny do it? Franny, would you mind? We'll help. Thank you, Franny.
We'll
Let's
figure it
do
out.
this.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's generally called radical democracy.
Right.
But I use the words radical democracy and anarchy interchangeable. It's just like
Yeah. No.
if somebody sees a podcast that has radical democracy in the title, they're like, I don't really care that much. But it's like anarchism, that's exciting. But that's yeah. So I would say that is explicitly like definitionally for me what I would call anarchy or anarchism. The moment when the authority figure he leaves.
Or has proven to be completely inept or
Yeah.
hostile. Yeah.
Yes. The money ceases to matter and the community just comes together. I mean, just like at the end of It's a
Mutual
Wonderful Life.
mutual aid, basically, is what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. And that, I mean, that's it. And when that, and actually that was the moment when I was watching the trailer when the ump walked away, and I was like, fuck, this isn't a stretch to talk about this film on my podcast. It literally has a moment. It's a revolution, right? The authority figure falls apart, and then the community reconstitutes itself in a new order in
Yeah.
the most laid back, chill baseball way. It's perfect.
And I think, I mean, that to me, that's optimistic. I think there's certainly a version of this movie where they would have come to blows and they wouldn't have been able to continue playing, or it turned into utter chaos. It's just riding on that line of chaos. Like the field itself loses its definition as it gets darker. Yes, there's lighting, but it's very hard directional lighting, and you don't quite know where the bases are or where the chalk lines are, what's fair, what's foul. That's because I wanted it to sort of bleed into the outside world. But so there is a sense of things dissolving, but they hold it together.
Yeah.
And for me, that's I think just a faith in people being able to pull together, even if they're at different. They come from different perspectives, but if everybody wants a thing, then you can find a way to move forward. So I think there could have been a very cynical film where the umpires leave and everything falls apart, and someone might have made that into a slasher film or something where the baseball players kill each other. I didn't want to do that. I think, yeah, I think they find a way.
I mean, shit. Should we leave it at that? That was perfect, Carson. What else do you want to say? Because you nailed it for me, for my purposes.
Yeah, I don't know. I wasn't actively thinking about radical democracy or anarchism when I made the film, but I see exactly what you're saying. That it certainly fits this idea. I don't know. I don't know how this translates to a very mass scale. I'm not invested in thinking about political action all the time. I don't think that what happens in Eephus could be applied to our current society. That we just figure out a way. But I think like everything has to start small, and I think if we make the effort to connect with people and do these things that we love, if everyone goes and joins a rec league, in a metaphorical sense, if everyone goes and does whatever that thing is, I think we're all a bit closer, and we've sort of already started to dissolve these apparent boundaries that are really being exaggerated by social media and the news. Like these divisions between people are being really they're being intensified by the way people are talking about them. And I think if
You're,
people just go out and play baseball with each other, you realize that you're not that different.
You were like defining the basic premise of this podcast as you were speculating on what you did in Eephus and what it could mean.
Right.
This. I would also recommend gardening and farmers markets. This is my
Yeah,
traditional,
go to a
like,
co-op. Yeah,
yeah, that's it. And it's like,
it's
and
not
then people say
rocket
like,
science.
yeah, and it's just gonna save the world. It's like, well, you going to a farmer's market, no, that's probably not going to save American democracy like tomorrow.
No.
But everyone doing as much of that as they can in the long run is the only thing that's going to save
Yes,
America.
and to be reminded that people are real and not just some character on your phone. That people have really sometimes very contradictory thoughts, and they respond in wildly varying ways to different stimuli. It's not just we're not monoliths, and this whole idea of the right and the left, or this generation versus this generation, or urban versus rural. I find it all very simplistic discourse. And yeah, I mean, granted, this Eephus is about suburban life. It's about like working class guys who live in the suburbs, and they're not radically different. They're not completely from different life scenarios. But the way I've observed it is that those people, without a baseball league or without something like that, and I've certainly noticed this change in the wake of COVID, that like they don't even connect. Those people don't even connect.
Mm.
And so your neighbor even starts to become like they're lumped in with this really broad and simplified view of someone based on their politics, or what you think they might be like. That wouldn't happen if you were just going out and playing baseball together at the field once a week. And I think that COVID killed a lot of that sort of extracurricular activity for a lot of people in the suburbs. And I've observed it happen. So, that leads to polarization and to another form of chaos, which is negative. But I
Yeah.
think, yeah. So I think, I don't know. I don't need to repeat myself.
Like,
You brought up, you brought up John Ford earlier. I mean, like I just saw Man Who Shot Liberty Valance last night. It's just a gobsmacking masterpiece. But
wait, not for the first time for Carson. For the first time?
no.
Okay. Oh shit. Oh,
I
all right.
haven't
Yeah.
seen it in a very long time.
Yeah.
But Ford's a big influence for me in general. But the way that he deals with these clashing tensions within America, and always finds a place of optimism that's also unresolved, I think is like a great model for me. But even just reading about and hearing about the kind of sets, the productions that he cultivated, just they feel like what we did with Eephus, like a big group of people. With him, they'd be hanging out in the desert. They'd be playing poker every night.
Yeah.
Every night. They'd be having a good time when they weren't working, and that's like what our set was like. So a sustained period of like communal activity, I think, is just it's a good balm for the soul, I think.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And there's a lot of people who talk about Ford as whatever a a, a racist and imperial. I mean, and all that stuff is in his films,
Mm.
but he was a director who was trying to come up with a vision, yeah, of American democracy that that worked. It wasn't a coherent vision, but honestly, if someone has a coherent vision where everything, everyone fits in their place perfectly and it all works out, that's the
That's
that's the
somebody,
scariest vision.
that's someone who's putting themselves above others in some way,
Yeah.
making judgments and proclamations. I think that's the great strength of Ford, is he recognized his own failings, his own weaknesses, and I think those are part of the films. Those are there in the text, and yet there's always also this striving for something different or something better. That's and having just seen Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, that's what it's all about. The kind of the tension between barbarism and civility, and how do we move forward in a. I mean, we could talk about that film on this. You should you could do a
Oh,
whole podcast about that film in terms of radical democracy, I think.
Yeah, no. So I just recorded an episode with the director of this new documentary called Henry Fonda for President,
Yes, yes.
which,
You spoke with him?
yeah, with
Uh,
Alexander Horvath. Yeah.
yeah, I love him. I
Uh,
I met him in Spain actually. We were both there showing our films, and he was just in LA as well. That's kind of one of my favorite films of the year.
yeah, me too. So I'll email him and tell him that we talked. Because actually, I mean, I watched Eephus and Henry Fonda for President in the same week,
Mm.
and you know, it fit. Look, in terms of the stuff I'm interested, in terms of the stuff I'm interested in, those are two really. I usually have like one filmmaker on a year on this podcast because there's only so many films that are really what I want to talk about, you know.
Yeah.
And I actually had the director of Secret Mall Apartment on a couple of weeks ago. I don't know if you saw that one.
No, I haven't.
That's I recommend Secret Mall Apartment.
Huh.
It's also about a movie about development and how people in a community respond to their place being taken from them. Although it is a true story.
Okay.
Unlike Eephus, that their their neighborhood gets developed into a mall, and they decide to make an apartment in the bowels of the mall. If you can
Yeah,
believe
yeah.
that,
Well,
it's
the
the
exact
weirdest.
narrative of Eephus may be fictional, but I will note that this happens all across the country, and
Yeah.
in the specific case of a field in Pawtucket, where the Pawtucket Paw Sox, an affiliate of the Red Sox, used to play, and then in the last 10 years they moved to Worcester, maybe even the last 5 years. I can't remember exactly when it happened, but McCoy Stadium is the name of this field, and it was just torn down to make way for what, a middle school. so this happened, and it's a historic park, So the film mirrors life and vice versa. So I wasn't. It wasn't just a fantastical scenario we came up with. It's very rooted in real things. But more often it'll be like an actual. It'll be housing, or it'll be a strip mall or something. But I didn't want it to be a big greedy developer, because I think that would have really narrowed the film in terms of its meaning. Would have made it
Yeah, it's a
like a screed against development and gentrification, rather than a film about inevitable change.
yeah, like I mean the that Muppets movie, the one that has Jack Black in it from like I don't know 10 or 15 years ago. It parodies that, like it's like the Muppets theater is going to be destroyed by a greedy developer, like that, like it's a joke at this point. The idea that a cherished institution is going to be destroyed by a greedy developer. So your movie, which is about a not so cherished institution, which is going to be destroyed by the community who wants to educate their children. That's a delightful inversion.
Yeah.
Um, I could keep talking. I could do this for another hour, Carson. So I think it's time to wrap up. And I just want to ask if there's anything else you would like to say or add, besides that people should see Eephus. I mean, I think they should watch Eephus.
Yeah, that I think so. If you've made it this far and haven't seen Eephus, I think you should go watch it.
Yeah.
I think you'll enjoy it. It is currently available on video on demand, and wherever you watch movies, you can pay a small fee and have it on your TV. I think it's Amazon, Apple, all these
Yeah,
all,
it's on all
all
of
these
the.
greedy behemoths that we don't like. But that's where it is right now, and it still has a few theatrical dates. If you follow us on Eephus Film on Instagram, you can keep up with where it's screening. There are still theatrical dates throughout the country, and in May, actually, in smaller markets. So maybe it'll come through your town, and that's the best way to see it, I would argue.
Yeah, no, it came to Chapel Hill just for like a week. It was at the theater, the indie theater that I worked at when I was in grad school, but it was here just a week, and I was scrambling for a babysitter. Maybe I should have just abandoned but my wife really wanted to see it also. And then by the time we had gotten a babysitter, it was gone. So we watched it on video on demand in this horrible fallen digital world that we live in.
Yeah,
But
yeah. Well, hopefully you have a good TV and a good sound system.
yes, we do. It was COVID. We got a good TV and a good sound system during COVID
Oh
because we
yeah,
were, you know,
You
for
had
Dune, basically. Got a good TV and a good sound system for Dune, although I hated the second one. All right.
yeah.
Carson, I really enjoyed this. I really recommend Eephus, and yeah, the spirit of what I would call anarchy is alive in that film, but it's just the spirit of humanity, of community, of life, and I do appreciate it not tipping into, you know, the bad kind of anarchy, but I also appreciate that that's always this, as you say, it's a somewhat utopian film.
Hmm.
It's they don't all love each other, they're not all friends, it's not perfect, it really is messy, flawed people who have created this beautiful but also kind of crummy and boring thing. And what that seems like something to aspire to these
Yes.
days, because the alternatives are so much worse.
Yes. Agreed. Agreed. The alternative is frankly no interaction with anyone other than through a screen.
Yeah,
So yeah, I think this is it's a utopia in my opinion.
I agree, mine as well. Thank you.